Hey, all right. Hey, guys. Hey, everybody. we got Nick Williams. He's with SVN, which is Commercial Advisors. He's here to tell us today about what's going on in Salem. You've probably driven by plenty of empty lots or for sale signs for buildings that are coming in or businesses going out and like, what's going on? Well, this guy knows what's going on, and he's our hookup.
We're excited.
Maybe.
Can't
Maybe.
wait. It's going to be awesome.
It's such a weird world to kind of live in professionally because there are things that are going on. We talked about this in the pre-production meeting, but there are things that are happening. It's like, oh man, can I say anything about that? But today I'll do my best to kind of protect the innocent while at the same time delivering some, hopefully what I hope is some good information, because I know you guys have a lot of listeners. You're doing a great job with the podcast, and so what I say here matters.
We're gonna hold you to it.
Yeah. So I'll do my very best.
So I always wondered about that. Like, is it mostly because nothing's like a done deal till it's a done deal, that type of thing?
Yeah.
Or is it more like to protect the business? Like, I don't want anybody to know until I want them to know.
Yeah, there's the controlling of the message. So a business or a property owner, they want to kind of control the message and make sure that what they say actually comes true. Yeah. And nothing happens until it happens. So just like with a residential real estate transaction, people can kind of sort of back out at any time. And
your time frame though is wild to me. Like if once we go into escrow, we're like 30, sometimes 45 days.
That would be the short end for us.
Yeah.
I mean, there was one property that we worked on for 4 years, the Statesman Journal building. We'll get into that. I've got another old Foster Farms facility down in Cresswell that I've had listed for like 2.5 years. We're under contract on that one. A couple days from now is a pivotal kind of decision point. Does earnest money get, does it go hard or not? So controlling the message, making sure that something is a done deal. But then on the business side of it, if a business is like downsizing, right? Sometimes we find out before employees do, right? And so, hey, we're in the market for, we're in 100,000 square feet right now. We're going to cut to 30,000 square feet. We're laying off 50% of our staff. They don't know, so like come in the back door.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So there's those kind of things that, because the place that a business operates in is outside of the people. It's and the people and the product. The place is the most important thing. They're third in that hierarchy. Yeah. So big decisions are predicated. Huge costs are predicated on space, and so. So controlling that message is really important. And then, there are different incentives and structures and so forth that governmental bodies like, a city, a county, a state will offer to a business that comes in and creates jobs. Yeah. And that's a really protected place as well. I mean, even we'll call like the economic development department with the city of Salem and say, hey, what's going in on this property? In some cases, they can't even tell us whether or not there's like an offer that's been given on it, things of that nature. So it makes sense, as I said earlier, to just kind of protect the innocent and like, we don't know, and we'll do a press release when we do, right? Yeah. So it's so in some cases we find out on things that way. So there might be some things that you ask me today and you're like, hey, what's going on well, it's not my project, but I'll do my best to hypothesize.
Yeah. This is what I think is gonna happen. In a perfect world, this would be.
And I know there's a fence around it. That's all I know.
Yeah. So there are these big pieces of ground in downtown Salem, and I've heard of things, trade and paper like negotiations happening. But in many cases, I don't know who it is if I'm not directly involved. Yeah. But the overarching theme is that commercial real estate tells a story just in terms of like the data and analytics that we have access to. And for me personally, that is equally, if not more fascinating than the individual, like this is what's happening at, 280 Church Street downtown. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, but some of those trends I think we can get into today as well.
It's so interesting with some of the commercial properties, some of the thought process that goes into a corporation deciding, I want this spot here, or there's no way we would ever move into the city. Yeah. It's like, I don't know if it's true or not, but I hear that like Chick-fil-A, they follow
Starbucks.
They have to be
Is
within
that-
a certain proximity. They like to be within a certain proximity of a Starbucks.
Or is it vice versa? Is it Chick-fil-A follows Starbucks or Starbucks follows? It was one of them because
Well,
they're
everybody kind of has their secret sauce in terms of what works. So, for example, Tan Republic franchise, I know the franchisor and a number of the franchisees, and there are stores that if this matrix is met, we know it's going to be a good store. We just know it is. If this matrix is not met, you're probably going to have to spend more money on advertising and so on and so forth, right?
it's like a science to it.
Yeah, there is. Whole Foods is another. I get asked a lot, like, well, when is Whole Foods coming to Salem? What I have been told by folks that have worked with Whole Foods is that that Salem doesn't have a high enough percentage of college graduates,
Oh,
right? So that's a matrix that they
wow.
that's a matrix that they pay attention to, according to what has come my way. Don't shoot me, Whole Foods, if I'm wrong.
So
but,
Salem needs to up their game on.
You guys got to get a little bit smarter before we move in.
yeah, and there are a lot of dynamics like that. Like, why doesn't downtown Salem have a grocery store? Well, 20 or 15 years ago, downtown Salem had fewer than 100 residential dwelling units. And today, I don't know the exact number, but we've grown 10x beyond that. But even so, that's only, 1,200, 1,400 residential dwelling units that are in kind of this downtown core. Is there enough critical mass there to actually support a neighborhood grocery store that you're going to be circling downtown for 15 minutes to try to find a parking spot or go into a parking garage, right? So those dynamics really, really matter.
And does the grocery store meet the demographic of people that want a downtown apartment, or do they want to shop at this type of store?
Yeah, it's you think about Salem. The two ends of the spectrum. You have Roth's, which is really good quality, good stuff, right? But it's at a higher price point. Yeah. And so people have said, well, would Roth's consider going into downtown Salem? Well, do they want to compete with their West Salem store? You know what I mean? Because that might be the next close. So there are some things like that where every business, especially retail, I would say it's mostly it's more scientific for retail and for industrial. So industrial properties like Amazon, they pick their locations on purpose. They want to be close to a freeway. They want an intersecting highway. Sure. So you see that here locally with the big Amazon distribution facility that's directly to the east of us from here. And in Woodburn, you can see that one from the freeway, and it's also, it's close to a lot of kind of state highways as well. So they can get out into the Tules and make their deliveries and it's efficient. So for logistical purposes and those types of distribution facilities, those things matter. So those are the thought processes that businesses and tenants go through when they're identifying where it is they're going to go. And then they also have like real estate people inside. So the structure, kind of the way that works, if you're a large company, you have internal people that are only concerned with certain matrix, and then the locations or the opportunities that might exist for expansion, and then they hire someone like me in a local market to kind of understand, okay, what are rents, what is the vacancy rate, what is market for us to ask a landlord to do, or what's normal within the city, right? So that's where we get pulled in on kind of more corporate type real estate transactions, is just to kind of be that local kind of boots on the ground.
Yeah, we talked to like one of our past guest was owner of Bentley's, and like what do you do? How do you pick out your locations? And one of the spots he's like, Commercial Street is one of the places that we watch all the time, and if something feels right, then I'll make a jump for it. But it has to feel right before we do that.
Yeah, and it's more difficult for a local operator to do that, because in that case, my guess is that Brandon is kind of the one that's looking for that. And I have worked with local kind of coffee shops before too, and so I engage a landlord only to find out, we're already pretty deep in conversations with like Starbucks or Dutch Bros or whatever. So when it's in many cases, when it's identified by a local kind of an operator, it was identified 2 or 3 years ago by their competition. So that's why you see, using the Dutch Bros or Starbucks kind of in that coffee example, they have the science down. I mean, they have a database of properties, and they have 4,000, using that as an example, different locations within the I-5 corridor that would work for them, and they also have like a no-go list, right? So
they probably just put the address in like some sort of algorithm or something that says yes, this is great, no, it's not, sort of thing.
Yeah,
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a wild, weird, nerdy world.
It's almost like like trading stocks. It's like you either know how to do it
or you don't.
You either know the product really well to make that decision. Or you got the algorithm down.
Or you've made some really educated guess.
That's a super good analogy. There are and that's why there are specific like real estate teams within corporations, is just to understand really, really well what's going on kind of in an area that we've targeted. And I mean, you kind of do need to have like scientists to a degree, like location scientists that are inside of your organization to be able to like kind of guide you in the right direction.
Well, I remember when we were looking for, because we used you for the 2 times we've done a commercial location, we used you.
Thank you.
Because you were great. So, but looking into it, like from our mindset, it was, okay, this looks like a good location. We just want to rent there. And it was interesting because in this scenario and the other scenario, we were competing against people. And I remember I think it was something on the first one, there were identical bids. It was us and one other person. They literally just had to pick one, and we lost out and then wound up going with the bigger space. And then here we lost out, and then the landlord wound up calling us like, what was it, 2 months later or something? But going into it, you just think, okay, this is the space, I want to rent it, and that's all there is to it. And so then when you're coming to us saying, okay, here's what you need to look at, here's what, the increase is going to be. I mean, I don't even remember all the terms you were using, and it was just like white noise to me. So I was like, just tell us what we do. Is this a good investment on our part?
Yeah. So, and your location really does matter for a lot of businesses, but for some it really doesn't. Some people can kind of operate out of a garage somewhere and they're just fine. And some folks just reach out to me and they say, hey, I've identified this place and I just want to use you kind of for like negotiations. And sometimes the other thing too is commercial real estate. Like if you've got a good building and that's well located, I mean, like where you're at currently, especially 5 or 10 years from now, you're going to be absolutely in love with this location because it's only
love it already.
Yeah, it's only going to continue to grow around you, and so your traffic counts and everything are just going to continue to grow. So I think you guys were kind of ahead of the curve by coming to this part of town.
But on accident. Like this wasn't like premeditated, I
think you guys had to get out of your lease early in order to pull the trigger on this one, right? Yeah. So so that's those are the location, kind of getting back to the original point, like the location's super important. And I think if any of the listeners are looking for space and trying to do it on their own, there are some great resources where you can kind of look around, but there's a lot of information behind the location. And, whether it be growth trajectory or local investment or, whatever. So that's kind of where that's where we fit into it is, this, okay, on the surface, this looks awesome. And the data justifies that position, or the opposite, where the location looks awesome, but did you know that they're building a drug treatment facility right across the street? You know what I mean? So those are things you want to know ahead of time because you're entering into a long-term deal. You're entering into a long-term agreement.
That's where like Nancy Joe's moves into like the next to the pot shop.
I mean, I think that was smart on their part. I'm just going to say there was strategy behind that.
Yeah.
But I remember getting the contract and being like, it's all these pages and just sending it to you like, are we good? Are we covered? Just tell us if this is a good contract.
Yeah, well, and so in terms of the timeline of a commercial real estate transaction, a sale in many cases is actually a lot quicker because it's kind of a standard purchase and sale agreement that we use. If you do any number of deals a year that are commercial real estate, you kind of understand it, you get it, and you can identify quickly if there's an issue with it. On the leasing side, I mean, I've had deals where we've negotiated the language in a lease for 6 months, And because, the tenant has an attorney and the landlord has an attorney, and the attorneys like to justify their fee,
Oh, yeah.
right? So it looks like someone has hemorrhaged all over this thing, right? With all the red lines that come back and forth. And sometimes the economics are in place. Everybody's singing kumbaya on the economics, but they just can't come to agreement on the lease.
Yeah.
Some tenants, I work with some corporate tenants, they have their own lease form because they're managing hundreds of locations around the country. So in the letter of intent, it specifically calls out that parties agree that the tenant's standard lease form will be used, right? And so that's sometimes a decision that a landlord has to make. But
I didn't know that you had to do. I remember it was a learning curve for us not knowing that you had to do the letter of intent before you could actually move forward with trying to negotiate. So when you're like, you got to do your letter of intent, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What does that even mean? It's like, well, you have to tell them what you're planning to do, and then if they like that,
it's like
then,
when you buy a car, going back to that, you have two different offices. So you have the office where you kind of negotiate, all right, so this is the price, this is what we're giving you for the trade-in, this is what your payment's going to be. Do you agree to that?
Yeah.
Right? You have a separate office that you go into where you actually sign the paperwork. So you've got a guy that understands the contract and he tries to sell you the snake oil and all that kind of stuff. I used to do that way back in the day. But there are two. One is economics and one is contract.
Yeah.
And so we have two kind of another option is it's a request for proposal. So if a tenant's identified maybe 2 or 3 properties, we'll submit a request for proposal and just say, hey, we the tenant are interested in this space. Just put your best foot forward, and then we're going to compare this with the other options that we've identified in the market, and that's the way that goes. So so there's a lot of different ways that you can do that.
Oh,
We're talking about the boring stuff first. We probably
I know,
lost
sorry.
it. We've lost everybody already.
I'm excited.
I think it's interesting. It's just, especially if you come to it from the landlord perspective too. If they have multiple tenants in the building, someone wants to move in, like, well, I make hamburgers and I want to put this guy out of business next to me who makes hamburgers, so I want to rent it right next to him. I'm going to lose a tenant that way.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it. So I've got to balance out, how does this fit within the scheme of all of our area? How much traffic and parking is this going to cause?
Yeah.
And is this tenant over here going to yell at me because this guy moved in and it makes him look bad, having, this proximity to that business?
Well, I'm negotiating. Actually, I just drafted the counteroffer earlier today, but I have a medical office building listed for lease. 4 tenants can go in it, and the tenant that we're negotiating with right now, represented by another broker, they wanted an exclusive on general medical practice in the building. Well, it's a medical building. That's a very broad exclusive for taking the smallest space in the building. So the tail's kind of wagging the dog.
Yeah.
So just from a negotiation standpoint, on the draft response that I sent over to the landlord to review, I simply stated, no, you cannot have an exclusive on this unit, but if you take the larger unit upstairs, we would consider it, right?
Yeah.
So those are all things that a landlord kind of weighs and measures. Like, exclusives are a big deal. I mean, especially we have a big.
We should have done that, didn't they? No, I'm just.
Well, we have a
Just
big
kidding.
office park, Creekside Corporate Center. We're the listing agents for that as well. Kurt Arthur is who I work with. He owns our shop. So, but we have a lot of exclusives that are in that building. It's 100,000 square feet of office space and something like 30 plus tenants. So we have multiple CPA firms, multiple engineering firms, so on and so forth that are out there, and some of them have exclusives, some of them don't. So if another tenant wants to look at it, this CPA firm has an exclusive here, but if we put you in that building over there, it'll work, right? So just a lot of things to kind of keep an eyeball on.
So one of the buildings that I think everybody has, with the move from Costco moving over from Mission Street in Salem to Kubler, and I think that was probably a great move because Mission Street is so hard to navigate up and down.
Yeah.
And trying to get into Costco, and they moved over to
Costco's just crazy to get into.
Yeah.
Period. No matter where they're at.
Yeah.
But
They move a lot of people through there, though.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It's so much more efficient. So I'm actually going there after we're done
All
here.
right.
Yeah. And, but no matter how busy they are, because the way that the site plan was designed, you can really get in and out of there, even on the busiest of days, in about 30 minutes. It's pretty
just
crazy.
The flow of it is crazy.
Totally. It's crazy. It's like it's like you're a cow that's being herded, but that's on purpose because they know that the volume of
And you
people
don't even realize
that they're-
you are. Just,
Yeah, totally. You
I'm
just
going
kind of
this
go
way
along
now.
with it. Yeah, I need AirPods and I need a heater and a generator.
paper.
You know what I mean?
I could literally
Yeah.
go in there blind, and just because how Costco's laid out, I know you walk into electronics.
Yeah.
And then you go straight down
Totally.
the aisle. That's where they get the guys. As
Yeah.
you walk in,
That's
it's your
where they
wife.
get the guy.
The wife takes the card. She says, "Well, I'm going to go get what we're here for." The guy goes over to electronics, and there's a big giant screen TVs. And then by the time he makes it over to where you're at,
He's trying to convince you to buy a big
they bring the
screen
snacks
TV.
out. Like get your energy back up.
It's so I went to, I think it was in Tigard. I had a meeting in Portland. I was coming home. It was like 4:30, 5 o'clock. I live halfway to Dallas. So I wasn't, I didn't want to come to South Salem. And then, so I stopped at the one in Tigard and it was completely backwards.
That's like
And
Albany. Isn't Albany backwards?
I was so
Yeah,
thrown. It just,
It's like slightly smaller
because we're
too.
in Costco
Yeah.
probably once a week.
Yeah.
We feed a lot of kids in our house, and it was shocking to me how disoriented I was
Yeah.
by walking in, and instead of kind of going straight and then taking a left and then zigging and zagging right, it was go in, take a left, and then you loop around to the right, and I
Yeah.
felt like I was in a different
Just want
world.
to curl up into a ball and
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
crying.
And
Totally.
there's traffic flow with,
Yeah.
with Costco. When you're walking down the aisle, you only go this way down the aisle as you're heading towards the back.
Yeah.
And you only go this way when you're heading back out
Or
front.
you get the
Yeah.
stink eye from people.
Oh, yeah.
So it was. I think Salem could handle a second Costco, and there's word of a whale, kind of looking at large pieces of property in the kind of the Kaiser Station area.
That area's been blown up.
Yeah. So I think that Salem could handle a second Costco, and it wouldn't surprise me if they were already looking for land. The kind of the question is, you were talking about and kind of alluding to that big box that was left on the Mission Street location.
Yeah.
Obviously Harbor Freight Tools went in there.
Yep.
Great fit for them. And Wonderland, I hear that they're going to be opening sometime in February. They're getting
Which is
really,
so
really
exciting.
close. Yeah, they're getting super close. But really the largest portion of that, so there was a home goods kind of industry retailer.
My mom was so sad that wasn't going to go in
It
there.
fell apart.
Yeah.
So kind of getting back to what we were talking about earlier, someone let the cat out of the bag a little bit earlier. I'm not saying that that's why it died, but there was chatter on social media about, oh my gosh, this home goods store is going out there and we're so excited and everything.
They even did the entrance.
Yeah,
Like
they did.
yeah.
Yeah, they did.
Oh, wow.
And if we're advising a landlord, we tell them don't spend any money until you've got the lease fully executed, which
Yeah.
means both parties have signed
Mm-hmm.
it and you've got, you have your first month's rent, your security deposit and everything that's been agreed to. Then it's memorialized.
Yeah.
And in that case, somebody kind of jumped the gun while there was still an out, and that's I think what happened there.
Yeah.
I don't know, other stuff going on. What do you guys want to
Yeah.
What do you guys want to talk
I'm
about?
excited about Wonderland. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm thinking as
so
I
like
grew up as a
go-karts
kid,
and a roller coaster.
Oh,
I thought
my
Wonderland
Yeah.
was dead.
So,
I thought
so
it
is
died.
this the same owner over by Pietro's?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay, because I was going to say it's the same logo. So
Yeah.
is that going
Yeah.
away then too?
My
Or do we know?
presumption is that it
Is Wonderland like a national chain, or is it?
I don't think it's national, but I do think it's regional. They've got
We thought it was just
one
like
or
a
two
local to
more up in
Salem.
the Portland. They've got one
Okay.
or two more up in the Portland area. I think it was that same trip when I was driving through Tigard and kind of getting out of town.
It looks amazing.
I
We're
thought
super
my
excited.
childhood died. For a while, I was like,
You thought your childhood
well,
died?
because you
Not
pop,
to be dramatic.
you're popping quarters in, playing like Mortal Kombat as a kid.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, they came out with it. You could just play it at home, and so that slowly started dying.
Yeah.
off. Like, oh, that's a thing that doesn't happen as much anymore. And then they just came roaring back with this brand new building.
Well,
I
we-
think people our age are more excited about it than kids are.
Yeah,
You know?
well, and I'm excited because we have grandkids. So
Yeah.
we've got a 4-year-old, 2.5, and she'll be 1 this weekend. So we've got a few grandkids that I'm going to be able to kind of pump through that place over the course of the next
excited.
decade, 15 years or so.
Yeah.
And so it gives me a reason to kind of keep going back. And this one is like, it's going to be so much better. I mean, it's just going to be cleaner in a better part of town. I think it'll feel safer. And a lot more to do. I mean, gosh, they've got like I've seen some of their Instagram videos, Dalkey Construction. If you guys don't follow
Yeah.
them,
Oh no, we follow 'em.
yeah, take a look. They're doing a really good job. Zach Stone's their photographer and doing a really good job of photo documenting that. But I mean, like a roller coaster and I think they've got go-karts inside, bumper cars. It's either
Yeah.
go-karts or bumper
there
cars.
laser
I can't
tag?
really tell.
I remember.
I'd be
feel like-
shocked if there wasn't.
Yeah.
I'm trying to picture it. Do they have the divided where it goes straight all the way back to the
Have
end?
you been
or-
in there?
No, I haven't. So it's basically the old tire repair shop
Yeah.
that
Okay.
was in Costco.
Okay.
And kind of that, let's see, what is it? It's like the northeast kind of quadrant section
Okay.
of the building. So it's back behind. Just drove by. I was just out there earlier today. They've got their sign up, and they don't want you going in the first entrance the way that you get into Harbor Freight or like the main entrance to
Why don't you go in the other way?
Costco. Yeah, they want you to take the second
Oh, the
entrance.
tire side.
So are they
Yeah,
taking up
okay.
all the rest of the building that's not Harbor Freight, or is there still a
There's-
section in the middle?
There's still, well, that section that's on the west side where the
Yeah.
home goods store was going to go into.
Because Harbor
that's-
Freight's in the middle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, that was backwards. in
Harbor
my brain.
Freight actually took a very small portion of it. If I were, they kind of cut the heart out of the melon, you know.
Because it has to go all the way back because they probably need a dock area.
Yeah, and I think Harbor Freight has a lot of kind of storage area in the back, but yeah, if it were my building, I don't know if I would have signed like the smallest tenant first. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, they thought they had the home store.
Well, yeah,
Just saying.
yeah. Well, Harbor Freight was open. I mean, gosh,
Oh yeah. I think you're
shortly
right.
after Costco moved out. That one happened pretty darn quick. So anyway,
So what else do we have on?
Well, we got stuff going on downtown. I mean, we touched on the Forge a little bit. I know that's one of the spaces where we were talking about before, where square footage wise is the trend in Salem is to go with smaller boutique type shops as far
Yeah.
as breaking up a space.
There were so many rumors about that though, because I heard it was going to be like residential apartments that were going to be there, and then like business space up above, or vice versa. Then it turns out there's no living space there. Correct?
yeah, there is not so far as I'm aware. So Anthem Wealth Strategists, formerly DPW, they were in the McGilchrist and Roth building.
Okay.
So they've moved in there. They were in like 8,000 feet before, so I know that they took that much or more. One thing that they're doing is that I think is a really, really great idea is kind of like co-working for what are they calling it? Oh my gosh, total brain fart here. But they're doing a kind of a collective. Actually, I think it just might be called the Collective, where it's like kind of women's services. So you know,
Oh, I
like
think I saw
hair
that.
and
Yeah.
nails
Has-
and something
It
like
has
that.
like a bar area too.
Yeah, there is.
Clink
There's
is
like
going
a
in there.
champagne
Clink.
type
Yeah,
of bar.
Clink.
Yeah. So that's happening in there, and then they're still trying to kind of nail down there who's going to round out the rest of the tenancy there. But the project is still going on, so the fact that they really have a plan this early on in the process is really good. And the principal in that partnership, his name's Chris Blackburn. Super smart guy. He understands this community really well. He actually was the buyer of the Park
One we had
Park
listed,
Lane
yeah.
property out there that we worked on since I was a teenager. But yeah, so there's so he's really sophisticated, does a good job, very flexible. He just likes to make a deal. And AJ Nash, he and Chris, so AJ's his broker. AJ does a great job, and I believe he's a partner in that as well. It's going to be successful because it just has energy.
Yeah.
You know, if you have an involved owner that's like, no, let's try this, and you kind of you approach it like it really matters.
Yeah.
Then when you have an owner that does that, the chances of success are just much, much higher. If it's a distant ownership group, and that's what that building was before, it was purchased by a Canadian investment group in like the mid 90s. And they came here for the ribbon cutting. So they did a renovation on it in the mid 90s. They came here for the ribbon cutting, and then the owner of the principal of that investment group never came back. And just over time, tenants were leaving. There started to be some deferred maintenance,
Yeah.
right? And then 2 or 3 years ago, there was one tenant that was left in the building, and I went in there and talked to him, and I said, well, what do you're like the Lone Ranger, man. Like, what are
Yeah.
you doing here? And he said, I can operate. He sold like coins and business cards, or not business cards, but like sports cards and stuff. And he said, honestly, my rents here are less than if I just rented a storage unit somewhere. So that's why I'm here.
Wow.
That's why I'm here. And so that was kind of it. So it just needed some new
Yeah.
life that was kind of breathed into it.
Yeah.
But in our world, we see this really broad disparity. Either you're a sophisticated ownership group and you have people that are helping you make decisions and so forth. The alternative to that is that you're distant and you're not engaged, and you just leave it up to your broker to kind of fill the place up, right?
Yeah.
The other alternate is someone buys something locally, right? Someone actually sees it. But the sad fact is that in Salem and in most other communities around the country, the owners are not local. It's somebody that's somewhere else, and the property, which is important to a community, just kind of becomes a line item on a balance sheet somewhere. And that was the case with the Statesman Journal building. So I was involved in that when we got the listing in 2020, like right after COVID. And it was actually, it had gone into receivership, meaning that the bank was taking it back from the borrower, and it wasn't generating any revenue. And it was built to be a newspaper publishing company, right? Well, what's the future of newspapers look like? So that just leads to this being a complete, either somebody's going to knock it down or it's going to be something completely different. And we worked on that one for a long time, and the entity that owns the person that owns Store-It, so they're a storage unit outfit. They wanted to just turn it into a big storage unit place because
And you're talking about the old Statesman.
the old
Church?
Statesman
Yeah.
building, 280 Church Street. And that it's half of a city block. It was an 87,000 square foot building. And I'd go in there by myself because we'd have to go in there periodically and do like a security sweep, right? Just to make sure that people weren't doing stuff in there that they weren't supposed to be doing. And it was creepy, right? I mean, I ended up getting a big old flashlight, and I may or may not have carried a firearm in there when I was going, but never had to do anything. But it was, but we would just kind of notice some stuff. People were getting in there, right?
What?
So yeah, it was wild. At one point, I took a group through, and the building's just massive. There's stuff everywhere in little nooks and crannies, and I hear, Nick, from like down the hall around the corner. Yeah, what's going on? Broken glass with a machete sitting on it. Yeah, it was wild. So broken glass with a machete sitting there. Don't touch it. We're okay. We're okay, right? So we kind of finished up our tour, and then we had a nighttime security guy who went and kind of did a sweep through it. There was a whiteboard where somebody had written, "I know how to get into your building. You're effed." Right?
What?
Yeah. So it was like some creepy stuff that we'd go into and see. So I'm
Like,
going
I'm
in.
watching
Oh,
you.
dude, it was.
It could be
Oh.
worse. It could be broken glass, and they're holding him at the machete.
Yeah, it was. But all of these things have a story.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that I really like about it. I've got a lot of different buildings like that where we've worked on it. But anyway, the buyer of this, what he ended up doing is the city of Salem. So one of the hoops that we have to jump through is like, okay, a property is zoned a certain way.
Yeah.
And that means that there are some things you can do there and there are some things that you can't. So
So what is a newspaper zoned at? Is it light industrial?
that
type?
was zoned commercial business.
Okay.
And the use of a newspaper, so the office uses, like sales staff and ads and that kind of stuff, the actual reporting crew, those were permitted uses. The production of the newspaper, so like the printing of it, which that ceased in Salem, I think in 2008.
That was like in a basement area, wasn't it?
It was,
Okay.
yeah. And but if now that use was grandfathered into that property, so they were able to do that for as long as they wanted to do it. But if somebody tried to replicate that, and let's say in 2015 said, I'm gonna print a paper in downtown Salem, that would not be permitted. So. And in that CBD, Central Business District zone, which is kind of the way that everything is zoned in downtown Salem, it's really office and retail heavy, and living, right? So, but in this building, you could do storage, but it could not be at street level. And so you basically had half of the building that this buyer couldn't use for his use. And the city of Salem, I was in the pre-application conference. That's one of the things that you have to go through with the city. Okay, these are the things we want to do. These are the plans for it. And there was a portion of the building, the old warehouse on the south side. It was elevated 4 feet off the ground. And he wanted to put storage units in that portion of it because it wasn't street level. It was 4 feet, 4 feet above the sidewalk. And the city of Salem, one of the folks in the planning office said, well, the way that we look at it, that's street level. So this would be a great location for a restaurant. It would be, and this guy's like,
because everybody wants to eat underground.
Well, no, it was above ground.
Oh,
it was
above
elevated.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you could do a pedestal and a really nice walkway going up, and it would be like fine dining, high ceilings, and all this kind of stuff. And the buyer's like, I don't do that. I mean, I'm a storage unit guy. And what we did was we introduced him with the executive team at the YMCA because they had expressed interest in purchasing it, but it was
right next door.
Yeah, totally.
And they were doing that whole big expansion there.
They were,
and
and they're already busting at the seams.
Yeah.
And but the problem was it was going to take them a long time to raise the money to actually purchase it and renovate it and do what they wanted to do with it. And that was a timeline that didn't really fit with the objectives of the seller. So we fused the buyer together with the YMCA, and the YMCA essentially leased everything on a long-term, super cheap deal that the storage provider could not use. So the YMCA is a master tenant there, and what they're going to do is they're going to sublease out some of the office spaces to other nonprofit. Some of the other nonprofit. Yeah, it's a really good idea. So Tim Sinatra with Salem YMCA, he called it the Block of Humanity. And the idea is because it's right across the street from the Transit Mall.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people in Salem that need services. One kind of little known fact about Salem is it's super weird. So Marion County, up until like 40 or 50 years ago, was required by the state's constitution to house all of our mental health and criminal justice system. So everybody that, as they were called back in the day, if you were crazy or if you were a criminal, you were going to Marion County. And then all of your family was kind of following you. Maybe not all of your family, right? But if you had,
in theory,
in theory, right? People are going to want to be close to dad or mom or whoever who's kind of going through a hard time so they could visit them. So we have this antiquated kind of system for efficiency's sake. Back in the day, it made all the sense in the world, but it created kind of this unusual, unique burden on the city of Salem because the residents of Salem and Marion County, because you have these other people that kind of, they need more than they can provide for themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think that we have kind of a disproportionate number of nonprofit organizations that are spread out and they all do, they do good work, but they're spread out wherever they can get space. So the effort is let's bring some of those services under one roof. So if a kid needs to go to CASA and mom needs to go to, she needs services
like
from
Liberty
the Union
House
Gospel
or
Mission or Liberty House or whatever. Yeah, let's not send them all over town. Let's put them in one place.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
And it's they're tearing the place apart right now.
they?
I walk by there multiple times a week and just kind of look in the windows. It kind of sucks because I used to have keys and I could go in and I had to give the keys over. But but they're tearing it apart. It's kind of an old building, so there's like asbestos and things like that need to be dealt with. But it's a big, expensive kind of a project, but it's going to be awesome for Salem. And so that's one that we were involved in that is really that we were looking, finally, it's done. I kind of felt like a kid was moving out of the house because, like I said, we'd worked on it for like 4 years.
That's wild to me.
Yeah.
Working on something like that for 4 years.
Another one was the J.C. Penney building, downtown Salem, which is still, that's a very sophisticated ownership group out of Portland. We represented the seller on that one as well. And that ownership group is really holding out for improvements to both the Salem Center Mall and additional residential development. The ideal situation for them would be get a first floor kind of an anchor grocery tenant
Okay.
So that, you know, all the people that are living in apartments downtown that might not have a car because the city has kind of done away with their parking requirements. So you can build apartment units and you don't have to provide any parking. So they're trying to kind of incentivize like people that want to live their life without owning a car.
Yeah.
So it would make all the sense in the world to have a grocery store someday. You just
Yeah.
need to have a willing, you know,
Yeah.
grocery store that's kind of willing to take
Walking
that on.
distance for a
Totally.
lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. So it would make all the sense in the world. The timing of that purchase was kind of tough because the city of, or excuse me, the state of Oregon, a lot of the employees downtown are state employees, and the state started to let people work remotely. So that was a shift in the dynamic and kind of the spending patterns in downtown Salem, and it hurt a lot of restaurateurs. I mean, there are some restaurateurs I think about, like, you know, Ritter's, Rudy's. There are some that are they're just always busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But then there are some that aren't. And those that aren't always busy, if you don't have that kind of critical mass that's downtown every day, like the state employees, because there's tens of thousands of people that are all within walking distance or should be within walking distance of downtown Salem for lunch or, you know, happy hour in the evening.
Yeah.
So that's made it a little bit more difficult in downtown. And then something that I hear a lot about is just safety.
Yeah.
You know, you got people that are on the street that need help. And because of the way that kind of the city and the state help people, they need to do certain things before help is kind of forced upon them. So you have these people that are just kind of out in the wild.
Yeah.
And so that has, you know, I think there are fewer people that are going downtown now. A client of mine is Bowen Vine, so I put them in South Salem, but knowing that their lease downtown was coming up, and they thought, well, so they have locations downtown Eugene. I helped them with that one, downtown Corvallis, and then downtown Salem. And their South Salem location was kind of their first attempt at kind of a suburban location.
And they're over by the
Northern Lights.
Northern Lights.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, they're over by Northern Lights. So, and that South Salem location is doing very, very well. And for efficiency's sake, you know, Matt Adams, one of the partners in the business, he said, well, Salem just can't handle two of us, right? So, and you know, for some, because they're like a premium, you know, they're premium burgers, shakes, fries, that kind of stuff. They're awesome. They're right across the street from my office now, so that's a blessing and a curse. But so there's some shifting, and so leases are coming up right now, and I would say the vast majority of leases across asset classes, with the exception of industrial, so you know, office and retail, in Salem right now, the trend is that leases are getting smaller.
As far as square footage.
As far as square footage. So that is reflective of spending patterns. Costs are going up significantly. I'm sorry, I've got an itchy nose today. But spending patterns are kind of shifting. And so what we're seeing right now is a lot of businesses that are just right sizing. In the office world, you know, it was, let's say, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years ago, everybody was in the office. Now we've kind of shifted to a more, you know, working remote is more acceptable. So 4 years ago, 5 years ago, the average office lease in Salem was about 4,000 square feet. Today it's like 960. To just kind of give you an idea of how that's shifting around.
And you mentioned like some of the department stores. I think Nordstrom's was the first to close. There's JCPenney's.
I think that shocked everybody when all of a sudden they announced they were closing. People were like, "What's happening?"
I mean, they're having an issue downtown with a lot of everywhere in the United States with the mall model of thing, where you have giant department stores kind of connected to a mall with maybe some smaller units in there. And they've either shifted where they've had to shift their entire design to an outdoor model,
like Lancaster.
has had to do like Woodburn
Or what's it
Outlets
called now?
The rack.
No,
The Nordstrom rack.
No, what's the
Willamette Town
yeah.
Center. Yeah.
Sorry, we still call it Lancaster because
I know we do too. If you've if
I try to
you've
talk
been
to
in
people about
Salem
the
for any
fountain.
period of time, yeah,
like
totally.
talking about like Lancaster, like,
Yeah.
do you remember the fountain? And people are like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like Lancaster Mall. There was
It had the fountain, and I would
no one remembers that.
I would bum pennies off of my grandma and throw them in there and make them
cleared out nowadays.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh! But it was
Yeah.
the coolest thing. But you tell people like even 10 years younger than us, they're like, no idea what you're
And you
talking
wouldn't
about.
just go to the mall to like they had events going on there. They don't have that's not a thing now. People don't like throw events at the mall. They didn't have like trading cards. And
Yeah.
they all had comic book fairs.
It's
and
just a
stuff like that.
collective. I mean, now it's kind of it's been well the shopping model is we don't shop for an experience. We kind of shop to be able to get in and get out really
Convenience,
quick.
yeah.
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 And you know, people don't really browse anymore. They get on their phone, they figure out what they want, and then they figure out who
Yeah.
has it. If nobody has it, they jump on Amazon and get it.
Yeah.
With the exception of food. You know, food is still doing very, very well.
Yeah.
One of our clients is the parent company of Roth's Fresh Markets, and it's a Canadian group. They're very, very involved, very smart, very good. But they purchased Roth's Fresh Markets and all their real estate a few years ago, and the time was right for the founders of Roth's to just, you know, okay, it's time for us to kind of move on.
Yeah.
And but it's worked out, I think, really, really well for at least the employees that I know that work at
Yeah.
you know, my neighborhood Roth's that I go to. They're like, yeah, I mean, the Pattison Group, they take awesome care of us. We really like them. I mean, we loved the Roth family, but we couldn't have asked for a better group to kind of take us over. So there was a kind of a capital shift. And so the strength in the retail market is grocers by
Yeah.
and large. Everything else is we're searching, I think, now more for kind of discounts. So you see the successful stores out at Willamette Town Center, Sierra Trading Company, TJ Maxx,
Yeah.
you know, Ross Dress for Less downtown, and kind of the more conventional retailers like
Yeah.
like the Nordstroms of the world, Macy's. Kohl's has announced that they're going to be departing downtown Salem as well.
What?
Yeah. So
So both Macy's and Kohl's are going?
correct.
It's interesting
Yeah.
these legacy corporate ones that have been around for so long.
Yeah.
Are making that shift, and then the building owners, you know, having to get super creative with how they use the space.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, JCPenney's is huge.
Yeah.
Nordstrom's was huge. You know, even I think we have Macy's closing very
Yeah.
soon. That's a huge space.
Are they closed already, or
No,
the
end
end
of this month.
Yeah.
Yeah, end of February they will no longer be in Salem, and they sold the building already to the same investment group that purchased the Salem Center Mall
Oh, wow.
for $10 million, and it was like I think $56 a square foot.
I was gonna say, why does $10 million not sound like a lot?
It's
for
because
the-
it's such a big building and
Yeah.
the parking, so the buyers of it really actually got a pretty fair deal, because what they paid for that big box is less than the average of what people are paying right now for industrial space, just like a warehouse,
Yeah.
you know. So they got a pretty good deal on, and they've got the term that we use is there's a lot of meat on the bone there because of what they paid for it.
Yeah.
So they're going to have room left in their budget to either do improvements or just offer really affordable, attractive lease rates to kind of attract
Yeah.
some activity. So so those are the kind of deals that we're starting to see now. Sales activity between 2022 to 23 and 24. 23 and 24 were pretty consistent. But sales activity by and large in Salem was down something like 70%, a little bit more, a little bit less, depending upon the asset class. Yeah. So, and that was completely predicated on interest rates. We kind of got high on our own supply, and you know, I mean, in a 3 or 4% interest rate environment, that's just going to stimulate almost like artificial activity. Like it's
Yeah.
not even real money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it is, but it isn't. And so there was, so 2021, 22 were like off the charts good by comparison. So 23 and 24 were actually pretty consistent with like 16 and 17. So even though our transactional volume was down a lot, when you take a look at the average per year transactions over it really wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
Like if you remove that chunk where it was inflated.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct. We had that bubble post COVID when Biden bucks were kind of flowing through the economy and people were making like really wild financial decisions.
Yeah.
But you know, now we're at it, I don't think we'll ever get down to that kind of capital environment where
Yeah.
money was so cheap. But if it can just get to a place, you know, if someone could take borrow money for commercial purposes at like 5 point something percent and it just stayed there and it was predictable, that would be really, really good. I mean, we'd be, and I think with some sound monetary policy, hopefully coming from the federal government now that we've been through the rough patch, that's kind of where everybody's hoping that we're going to land.
Do you see some of so the businesses downtown? I feel like we saw a trend of a lot of the smaller shops just starting to close up, just because of kind of the environment of downtown and how everything was kind of going. I remember there was or it's still there. It's an optics place,
Glance.
Yeah, so I think that's what it's called. I can't
Yeah,
remember.
they just sell glasses, right?
No, sunglasses.
Okay.
It was, I can't remember where it is, but I was looking for a pair of sunglasses and I couldn't find any. I was like, okay, I'll go I don't know, I would go to Nordstrom before to find something, but I wound up finding something there. And when I went there, she had her door locked. And so I had to knock on there was a little sign saying knock on the door and I'll come open it or something. I was like, well, this is odd. So she comes and she opens the door and then locks it very quickly behind me. And I was like, what's going on? And she was like, I mean, it's kind of what we have to do now. She was telling me how, and her and I got to talking. She was telling me how, a couple weeks before there was somebody outside and they were just running full force at the door over and over again. And she goes, and we just kind of have to sit here and wait for somebody to come, help. And I said, so what keeps you here if this is what is going on? She goes, and this was in 2023, I believe. And she goes, I have heard that come 2026, we are going to see so much amazing activity down here, and there's so many incredible things on the horizon for Salem. My husband and I sat down, we did the math on it and said we can make it till 2026. If it winds up being that doesn't come to fruition, we're content knowing that we've got to look at another plan. She's like, but we're really confident that the city of Salem is trying to do a lot of things to help kind of turn all of this around.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, it started, during the 2024 short legislative session, drugs were recriminalized.
Yeah.
So it's not like people are going to prison, but at least they're not being told you didn't do anything wrong. So that's important. And there is a lot of downtown Salem has the recipe to be super cool.
Yeah.
What I think had been lacking the last handful of years is, the most important group of people in terms of our community's livability is Salem City Council. And I'm excited about the turnover that happened this last election cycle, because we have more people now that have a business background.
Yeah.
And
They have more skin in the game, it feels like.
they do.
Yeah.
At least they understand a little bit more where businesses are coming from.
It's important for a decision-making body to understand the importance of customer service and inputs leading to predictable and positive outputs, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And we had a group of city council folks that I think largely were government employees, and if you're a public servant, awesome. We need you too. But some balance of it is important. And I think that we're striking more of a balance to kind of, our mayor, Julie Hoy, who's just a wonderful person. She'd actually be a great guest for you to have.
We've talked about seeing
have
if
you?
she wanted to come on. Yeah.
She loves kind of talking about her vision. She's a very, very compassionate, kind person, but she and her husband have owned a restaurant on Lancaster Drive.
What did they own?
Geppetto's.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's them. And so, they have to deliver a good product in order to survive. And that mindset coming into government, okay, if this city is to survive, if it's to survive and thrive, we need to deliver a good product. And for the last handful of years, the product hasn't been very good, as evidenced by people breaking into stores. And I'm friends with the folks that have Jackson Jewelers. Same story. Their door used to just be wide open. I could just pop the door open and say, hey, Tyler. Now, wisely, they, you make an appointment. You don't just show up anymore. I got to text him. Hey, are you there?
Yeah.
So we need to get back to that. And I think that's kind of what's on the horizon for us. City staff, earlier today, I was on I chair the government affairs committee for the Mid-Valley Association of Realtors. And our person today was Robin Dahlke, who is in the planning department, but she also oversees the flood insurance, the floodplain mapping and everything for the city of Salem. And she had some, she was a city staff person. They kind of have to be careful, right? Like they can't be too, but she was optimistic. She was optimistic being in the planning department of, I think that we are going to have some very positive policies that are coming our way. And her job is to be an administrator of those policies that are coming from the city council. But that city council is really, really important because they're the ones that really set the tone for what happens, especially in the business community of our, really of our entire region. I mean, Salem is the state's capital. We need to be setting a tone. We need to be leaders in this community. We need to be the ones that have the good ideas, not just the place that people kind of end up, And so I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for that, not just for my industry, but for the people that I serve. The businesses. I want the businesses to make more money. I want the landlords to make more money. I want the customers to be happy when they go in, because at the end of the day, it's that end user, that customer, that really matters and kind of drives this whole thing. We just need to make it easier for them.
So, what do you think the future of Salem holds in the next year or two?
Well, I
If
think
you had a crystal ball.
I think that we're going to come closer to understanding our identity as a community, because right now, if you ask 10 people, okay, summarize Salem in a sentence or summarize Salem in a word, right?
Yeah.
You're going to get 10 different answers. So I think that one thing that's going to happen is in the next handful of years, if you ask 10 people, you're going to get 5 answers. Or you're going to get 3 answers, where we're going to get a little bit closer. And there is some exciting stuff that's happening. I mean, we've got commercial flights that are flying in and out of this place. I used to be on staff at the Salem Chamber, and I mean, that was a big deal just to even talk about it. Like it was this big thing, like, oh my gosh, we can't handle that. No, we can. We've been able to support it now for like the last year and a half or so. And I mean, it's retracted and expanded, and I mean, we're building the plane as we go down the runway with that. But I think that that's a really big thing. And Salem, people that live here, a friend of mine, he's another residential agent, and he is volunteering his heart out. And he had put a call out for volunteers to remove the Christmas lights in downtown Salem, because it's all volunteers that do that. It's just people, the Salem Main Street Association. They're not paid anything.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the Salem Main Street Association, 100% volunteer. It's about a dozen or so people that kind of spearhead. Did you know that downtown Salem has a parade, Christmas parade?
So I didn't
Okay.
so I actually heard about that this last year.
I remember going to it years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for some reason,
And
I
then
thought it
Kaiser
went away.
took it over, I thought.
They
Oh,
did.
that's
We've
what it was.
got our own new one now. But so it's stuff like that, like the future of Salem. Getting back to volunteers. My friend
Community.
who volunteers in the community a lot. He had put on Reddit, and I mean Reddit, you go there for your, at your own risk, right? Because it's not generally very encouraging people. And he was just like the Reddit Salem thread, looking for some volunteers to help take down the Christmas lights. And the flack that he got from that, like, I see that you're a real estate agent. You've got money. You pay me, I will show up. You know what I mean? That was like the tone. Okay, so there's that. And in his post, I just said, there are about 250 people that make Salem happen for a community of 180,000 people.
Wow.
And that's the truth. And my hope is, and I think that what's happening is people will start to develop as more and more good happens. People will start to have more pride in the community. And if there is an opportunity to help do something, I want to see a Salem where that 250 people is 2,500 or 25,000 people. That's kind of my, I think that that's a direction that we can go. I think that another problem that we need to solve is our average wages in Salem. So getting over to kind of your residential world, in 2012, Salem was in the top 10% of affordable communities to buy a home in. And there was an entity, the National Home Builders Association, surveyed something like the 150 largest communities, and Salem was one of the most affordable. And the way that they figured that out was like average home price, average mortgage, and average home sale price,
Yeah.
right? So all of those factors kind of. So we were the like top 10 most affordable. And the most recent statistic that I saw was after 2023. I haven't seen 2024's numbers yet, but Salem went from top 10 most affordable to top 10 least affordable,
What?
meaning that our wages have not kept up with the appreciation of homes and the average home sale price. So another thing that we need to do, a problem that we're going to need to solve, is how do we drive those wages up? It's not, it's not lifting minimum wage artificially, because the state has done that. And we have still tanked. So it's going to come from innovation and understanding that we have some natural resources here that we need to be able to capitalize on. And intellectual, like thought property type. I mean, what would it take for Salem to bring in, something like a Google or and I'm not saying like the parent company,
Yeah.
but what can we do as a community to bring in those really high wage earning type jobs? Because the principal employer in our market right now is the state of Oregon, followed by, I think it's this Salem Health.
Yeah, the hospital and that.
Yeah, and then it's like the school district.
Yeah.
So those are three quasi-public entities where the majority of paychecks there are coming from. And so we need to shift that around some.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that those things will happen, but I'm confident that the statements that I just made will be listened to and understood by our current city council in a way that they weren't with the last body of councilors that were in those seats.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Well, it's interesting to talk about how the growth of the city, and especially over here on where we're at off Kubler. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like the prime land to bring some of those type of businesses over. I mean, as soon as Amazon moves in, some of these other tech companies start
Totally.
moving in
You
around
can see
it.
all the development happening.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
after we got in here, I remember
Yeah.
somebody telling us, you got an incredible spot. And we were like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, we love it. And then all of
Yeah.
a sudden we started seeing this. We're like, oh, that's what he's
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah, totally. You did, and this is where the developable land is, and particularly at Mill Creek Corporate Center, so directly to the east of us, the city of Salem. This was a good thing that they did, and this probably started 25, 30 years ago, but they started to put in the necessary infrastructure to attract large users and employers like Amazon. So, I mean, like heavy power, really fast, clean internet. So like fiber type stuff,
Yeah.
a lot of water for food processors and that kind of thing. So that groundwork was laid decades ago so that you could see the development that's happening right now. So that was an intentional investment that happened back then. Another thing too is even Costco. Costco coming over here to Kubler, before they could go here, there were traffic improvements. Kubler had to be widened. A whole lot of things. So there's a lot of work that happens before you buy a chicken, at Costco. There's a ton of preliminary work, and there's a lot of political maneuvering that developers have to go through as well in order to see a project like that through. The last city council tried to kill that project after Costco
I
had spent
remember that.
after Costco had spent millions of dollars on the traffic improvements. There were promises that were made. If you do this, we will do that. And the city, that council tried to renege on those promises. And so the developers said, no, we made a deal. And that project was allowed to be completed. So, we want our city to be a partner to smart growth. We want the city to be really on the front side of the thinking about these things and kind of leading the intellectual conversations. not the obstructionist. Like, you can't do that here. So again, I'm hopeful that the city will become that.
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
With for Salem,
Yeah.
that things are going to make headway and people will be able to grow and thrive here. So, how do people, if someone had a question about a commercial property or like, how do I make a move from this building to this building? How do they get a hold of you?
Instagram. So my Instagram handle is nick.cre. So that's commercial real estate, just my first name, .cre. And then they can email me. Email address is nick.williams@svn.com.
All right. Well, Nick, thanks for coming on Hustle
Yeah,
Northwest.
this was amazing.
Yeah, eye-opening as far as finding out a little bit about what's going on in Salem, and I can't wait to see what comes around.
Keep up the good work, guys.
All right.
Thanks.
You do
Thanks.
great. Thank you.